The smell of homemade spaghetti sauce filled our kitchen that Tuesday evening in March. Mom was stirring the pot, humming some old song she'd loved since college, while I sat at our worn wooden table pretending to study for my chemistry test. Really, I was just watching her move around our small but cozy kitchen. The way she'd pause to taste the sauce and scrunch her nose if it needed more garlic. "You know," she said, turning to me with that mischievous grin that always made me laugh, "I think I'm finally getting the hang of your grandmother's recipe. Only took me 15 years. I was about to tease her about burning the garlic bread last week when the doorbell rang. We both froze. Dad wasn't supposed to be home for another hour, and we rarely had visitors on weeknight evenings. The sound echoed through our house like a gunshot, sharp and unexpected. "I'll get it," Mom said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Put something in." Her voice had changed. The lightness was gone, replaced by something cautious, almost fearful. I followed her to the front door, my textbook forgotten on the table. Through the peephole, I could see a familiar silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, holding what looked like a suitcase. My heart did a little skip. Maybe Dad had gotten off work early and decided to surprise us with a weekend trip. Mom opened the door, and there he was. It's my father, David Mitchell, looking exactly like he did every morning when he left for his job at the insurance company. Same brown hair, same tired eyes, same rumpled shirt. But something was different. His face was set in a way I'd never seen before. Hard and determined, like he was bracing himself for surgery. Mom's voice was small, confused. "What are you doing here? And why do you have a suitcase?" He didn't step inside. Didn't even look at me standing behind her. Just stood there on our porch, gripping that suitcase handle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I'm moving out, Linda. Tonight." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my stomach drop, the way it does when you miss a step going downstairs. Mom's hand flew to her throat, and I saw her wedding ring catch the porch light. "What do you mean, moving out?" "David, if this is about the fight we had last week, it's not about any fight." His voice was steady, rehearsed. "I'm in love with someone else. Her name is Patricia. I've been seeing her for 8 months. 8 months. I did the math in my head. 8 months ago, we'd gone to my cousin's wedding together. 8 months ago, he'd helped me with my college applications. 8 months ago, he'd kissed Mom goodbye every morning, just like always. "I don't understand," Mom whispered. "David, we can work through this. We can get counseling. We can—" "No." The word came out sharp, final. "I've already made my decision. I'm going to live with Patricia and her children. I've transferred the house to her name, the cars too. Most of our savings. She needs the financial security for her kids." I felt the world tilt sideways. Our house. The house where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Where Mom had painted my bedroom walls purple because it was my favorite color. Where we'd carved a jack-o'-lantern together just 5 months ago. "You can't do that," I said, my voice cracking. "This is our home." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Guilt, yes, but also something else. Relief. Like he'd been carrying a heavy burden and was finally allowed to set it down. "I'm sorry, kiddo, but Patricia's kids need stability. They've been through a lot with their father leaving, and I want to give them the security they deserve." "What about the security I deserve?" The words burst out of me before I could stop. "Them? What about Mom? What about our family?" "They'll be fine," he said, but his voice wavered slightly. "You're smart. You're strong. You'll figure it out." Mom was crying now, silent tears that streamed down her cheeks. She wasn't fighting anymore, wasn't arguing. No, she was just standing there watching 23 years of marriage crumble on our front porch. "Left some money in the checking account," Dad continued. "Enough for a few months. I should give you time to find somewhere else to live." "Somewhere else to live?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "David, this is my home. This is where we built our life together. Not anymore." He picked up his suitcase, turned to go, then paused. "I'll send for the rest of my things later." "Don't." make this harder than it has to be. And then he was gone. Just walked down our driveway, threw his suitcase in the back of his car, and drove away. I stood in the doorway, watching his taillights disappear into the darkness, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Something that had been solid and secure suddenly felt brittle, fragile. Mom closed the door and leaned against it, her body shaking with sobs. I put my arms around her and she felt so small, so breakable. Like she might dissolve if I held her too tight. "Mom," I said, "Mom, it's going to be okay." But I didn't believe it. Not even a little bit. We stood there in our hallway, holding each other while the spaghetti sauce burned on the stove and my chemistry textbook lay open on the table. The house felt different already, emptier somehow. Even though he'd only taken one suitcase later that night. After Mom had finally fallen asleep on the couch, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about what he'd said. Patricia's. Kids need stability. They've been through a lot with their father leaving. What about me? What about what I'd been through? What about what I was going through right now? I thought about all the times he'd told me he loved me. All the baseball games he'd coached. All the birthday parties where he'd worn silly hats and made me laugh until my sides hurt. Had any of it been real? Or had I just been practice for the family he really wanted? The next morning, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of bills spread out in front of her. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing the same clothes from the night before. "How bad is it?" I asked, sitting down across from her. She looked up at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. Real, raw fear. "I don't know how we're going to make the mortgage payment. He took almost everything. The savings, the investment account, even the emergency fund." I picked up one of the bills. Electric company. Past due. The amount at the bottom made my stomach clench. "What about your job?" "I work part-time at the library, honey. Make $12 an hour. It's not enough to cover the mortgage, utilities, food, your school expenses." Her voice trailed off. That was the moment I realized everything had changed. Not just our family, but our entire future. College applications that had seemed like exciting possibilities now felt like impossible dreams. The stability I'd taken for granted, the roof over our heads, the food in our refrigerator, the assumption that tomorrow would look basically like today's, all of it was gone. I thought about Patricia's kids, the ones who needed stability. I wondered if they had any idea what their stability had cost. If they knew that somewhere across town, a woman was crying over bills she couldn't pay and a teenager was watching his future disappear. That night, I lay in bed and made a promise to myself. I would remember this feeling, the helplessness, the betrayal, the fear. I would remember exactly how it felt to have everything stolen from you by someone who was supposed to love you. And someday, when I was strong enough, I would make sure he remembered too. That was the last time I saw him. As a father, from then on, he was just a man who broke us. The first eviction notice arrived on a Thursday morning in May, 2 months after Dad left. I was getting ready for school when I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath from the kitchen. She was standing by the window holding a legal-looking envelope, her face pale. "What is it?" I asked, though I already knew. She handed me the paper without saying anything. The words blurred together at first, all legal jargon and official letterhead. But the message was clear. We had 30 days to pay the full amount, owed, or vacate the premises. 3 months behind, Mom said quietly. I kept hoping, ... I kept thinking maybe he'd change his mind, come back, help us figure this out. But he hadn't come back. In fact, the only sign of life from him was his Facebook profile, which I'd started checking obsessively, like picking at a scab. Photos of him at Patricia's daughter's graduation party. Him teaching Patricia's son to throw a football in what I recognized as our old backyard. Him smiling at a restaurant I'd never been to, his arm around a woman with perfect blonde hair and a smile that looked like it had been bought. "We'll fight it," I said, crumpling the notice. "We'll get a lawyer. Will with what money?" Asked, Honey, I'm working double shifts at the library and picking up cleaning jobs on weekends. We're barely covering food and utilities. I wanted to argue, to insist there had to be something we could do. But the truth was sitting right there in front of us, printed on official paper. We were losing our home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of phone calls and desperate searches. Mom called her sister in Oregon, who offered to let us stay temporarily, but couldn't afford to help with plane tickets. She contacted legal aid, but they were backed up for months. She even swallowed her pride and called Dad's work, only to be told he'd taken a leave of absence and they couldn't give out personal information. Meanwhile, I was trying to hold my life together. Finals were coming up, my guidance counselor kept asking about my college plans, and my friends were all talking about graduation parties and summer jobs. I felt like I was watching their lives through glass, present but somehow separate from all of it. The day we had to leave the house, I woke up at 5 a.m. and walked through every room one last time. My childhood bedroom where I built blanket forts and stayed up late reading comic books. The living room where we'd watched Christmas movies every December. The kitchen where Mom had tried to perfect Grandma's recipes. I found myself in my parents' bedroom, Mom's bedroom now, I guess, staring at the empty closet where Dad's clothes used to hang. There was a water stain on the carpet where he'd spilled coffee that one morning, and Mom had been so angry about it. And now it just looked like a shadow. You ready? Okay. Mom asked from the doorway. She was holding the last of our boxes, and her face was streaked with tears. Yeah, I lied. We moved into a motel first. It's a kind of place with weekly rates and thin walls where you could hear everything your neighbors were doing. Mom had found a tiny apartment across town, but it wouldn't be available for another month. So we lived in room 237 of the Sunset Motor Lodge, with 2 beds, a microwave, and a view of the interstate. I got a job at a pizza place, working evenings and weekends. The money wasn't much, but it helped with groceries and gas. Mom was working herself to exhaustion, taking any job she could find. House cleaning, dog walking, even helping with inventory at a warehouse. I'd come home from school to find her asleep on her bed, still in her work clothes, too tired to change. This is temporary, she'd say whenever she caught me looking worried. Just until we get back on our feet. But weeks turned into months, and getting back on our feet felt less like a plan and more like a fantasy. The apartment we'd found fell through. Someone else offered cash up front. Then another one. And another. Turned out that when you don't have references or savings or a co-signer, finding a place to live is nearly impossible. By August, we were living in Mom's car, a 2004 Honda Civic that smelled like the vanilla air freshener she'd hung from the rearview mirror and the fast food we'd been eating too much of. We'd park behind the 24-hour laundromat where I'd gotten a second job. And I'd do my homework in the fluorescent light that streamed through the windows. I'm sorry, Mom would say sometimes, late at night when she thought I was asleep. I'm so sorry, baby. This isn't how your senior year was supposed to go. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. That she was doing everything she could, that I was proud of her for fighting so hard. But the words felt too big, too heavy. Instead, I'd just reach over and squeeze her hand. During this time, I started keeping things. At first, it was just practical copies of the eviction notice, receipts for the storage unit where we'd put our furniture, documentation for the assistance programs we'd applied for. But then it became something else. I kept the letter from the electric company threatening to shut off our power, the notice from the bank about the foreclosure, the medical bills from when Mom got sick from stress and had to go to the emergency room. I told myself it was just being organized, being responsible. But really, I think I was building a case, evidence, proof of what had been done to us. The worst part was seeing how it was affecting Mom's health. It's right. Always been energetic, optimistic, the kind of person who could find something positive in any situation. But stress was eating her alive. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. She developed a cough that wouldn't go away. She started getting headaches that would leave her curled up in the back seat of the car, holding her head in her hands. Oh, I need to see a doctor, she admitted one evening in September. We don't have insurance, I reminded her. I know. But something's wrong. I can feel it. The emergency room bill was $2,847 for tests that showed she had high blood pressure and severe anxiety. The doctor prescribed medication we couldn't afford and recommended rest that was impossible to get that night. I sat in the car while Mom slept fitfully in the passenger seat, and I looked at my father's Facebook again. New photos from a weekend. Trip to the mountains, Patricia's kids building a snowman. Him cooking steaks on a grill that looked suspiciously like the one from our old backyard. I closed the laptop and stared out at the parking lot. A year ago, I'd been worried about my SAT scores and whether I'd get into a good college. Now I was trying to figure out how to afford Mom's blood pressure medication and whether the laundromat would let us use their bathroom again after hours. They say success is the best revenge. I say survival is. 5 years later, I was sitting in my own apartment, a real apartment, with a lease in my name and everything, reading my acceptance letter to graduate school. The letter was from State University, offering me a full scholarship plus a research assistantship in their psychology program. I read it 3 times before I believed it was real. "Mom?" I called out. "Mom, you need to see this." She came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. We'd been living in this 2-bedroom apartment for 6 months now, and she still seemed surprised sometimes when she remembered it was ours. That we had our own kitchen, our own bathroom, our own front door with a deadbolt. "What is it?" she asked, and I handed her the letter. I watched her face change as she read it. The disbelief, then the dawning realization, then the tears. She looked up at me, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Full scholarship," she whispered. "Honey, oh, my brilliant boy." "Research assistantship too," I said. "It's enough to cover living expenses." She hugged me then, and I could feel how much healthier she was now. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost. Her cough was gone, and the lines around her eyes were from smiling again instead of stress. It hadn't been easy getting here. After we'd finally found this subsidized place in a complex that looked like it had been built in the 1970s and forgotten about, had finished high school and started community college. I'd worked full-time at a grocery store, taking classes at night and on weekends. Mom had found steady work as a receptionist at a dental office, and slowly, painfully, we'd clawed our way back to something resembling normal life. I'd transferred to State University after 2 years, majoring in psychology with a minor in business. I've been fascinated by the psychology of trauma, of resilience, of how people rebuild their lives after everything falls apart. I wondered if there was a connection to my own experience, but I told myself it was purely academic interest. My grades were perfect. They had to be. I couldn't afford to fail a single class, couldn't afford to retake anything, couldn't afford to be anything less than exceptional. While my classmates were joining fraternities and going to parties, I was studying in the library until it closed. Then going to work at the restaurant where I waited tables until midnight during those years. I'd occasionally hear things about Dad through the grapevine. A cousin mentioned seeing him at a charity event, looking good, talking about his stepdaughter's acceptance to private school. A family friend said she'd heard he'd bought a boat. Another mentioned seeing him at an expensive restaurant downtown, celebrating some anniversary. I'd stopped checking his Facebook after the first year. It was too painful, too infuriating. But I couldn't stop the reports from filtering through. He was doing well, more than well. He was thriving. And you know what? I was glad. I was glad he was happy, glad he felt secure, glad he was living the life he'd chosen. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew that happiness built on someone else's suffering isn't real happiness. It's just delayed consequences. The day I graduated from State University, Mom and I drove to the ceremony in the used Honda Accord I'd bought with my own money. It wasn't much, 120,000 miles. Dent in the passenger door, a radio that only worked sometimes, but it was mine. Paid for with money I'd earned, insured with a policy I'd researched and purchased myself. I'm so proud of you, Mom said as we walked across campus. Not just for graduating, but for who you've become. You could have let what happened make you bitter, angry, but you didn't. You chose to build something better. I smiled and squeezed her hand, but I didn't tell her the truth. I was angry. I was furious. I've been carrying that anger for 5 years, feeding it, nurturing it, letting it drive me to work harder, study longer, achieve more. I'd channeled it into something productive, sure, but it was still there, burning steady and bright. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a nice restaurant. Nothing fancy, but nicer than anywhere we'd been in years. I watched Mom look around, at the cloth napkins and the wine glasses, and I made a promise to myself. This was just the beginning. Graduate school was different. I was older, more focused, more driven than my classmates. I'd already survived the worst thing I could imagine. Everything else felt manageable by comparison. I threw myself into my research, studying the long-term effects of family trauma on adolescent development. My advisor called my work groundbreaking, though I suspected he didn't realize how personal it was. I also started my own small business on the side, helping other students with their research and writing. Nothing huge, but enough to pay for groceries and put a little extra in savings. I'd learned that financial security wasn't just about having money. It was about having options, having control over your own life. By my second year of graduate school, I'd saved enough to move Mom into a better apartment. Nothing luxurious, but a place in a safer neighborhood with a view of the park instead of the parking lot. I'd also started a small emergency fund, something I'd sworn I'd never be without again. That's when I started hearing different rumors about Dad. That Patricia's oldest son had gotten into some trouble with drugs, thought there were problems with the business Patricia had started with Dad's money. That things might not be as perfect as they'd seemed. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was too busy, too focused on my own life to worry about his. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. After all those years of watching him live high while we struggled, part of me wondered if the universe was finally balancing the scales. I was in my final semester, working on my thesis and preparing. For my defense, when I got a call from my cousin Sarah, she lived in Dad's neighborhood and she had news. "I thought you should know," she said. "Your dad's house is for sale, has been for a couple of months. And I heard through the grapevine that Patricia left him, took the kids and moved to Florida." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. When? About 6 months ago, I think. He's been living alone in that big house, and apparently he can't afford the payments anymore. The real estate sign says it's a short sale. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall. The house he'd stolen from us was being sold because he couldn't afford it. The family he'd destroyed us for had abandoned him. The life he'd built on our suffering was falling apart. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like justice was being served, but all I felt was empty. Let them enjoy it. I knew one day the bill would come due. The knock came on a Tuesday evening in October, just as I was finishing dinner. I'd been living in my townhouse for 6 months, now a place I'd bought with my own money, with a mortgage in my own name, in a neighborhood where I felt safe walking at night. Mom was visiting her sister in Oregon for a few weeks, her first real vacation in years. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends usually called or texted before coming over, and I'd just spoken to Mom that morning. The knock came again, more insistent. This time, and I walked to the door wondering if it was a neighbor or maybe someone looking for directions. I looked through the peephole and felt my blood turn to ice water. It was him, my father, standing on my front porch, looking nothing like the confident man I remembered. He was thin, not healthy, thin, but gaunt, like he'd been sick. His hair was mostly gray now, and his clothes hung loose on his frame. He was holding a small suitcase, the same battered one he'd carried the night he left us. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring through the peephole, watching him shift nervously from foot to foot. He knocked again, and I heard him clear his throat. "Please," he said, his voice muffled by the door. "I know you're there. I just need to talk to you." I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Just stood there in the doorway, looking at the man who'd destroyed my family 6 years ago. Up close, he looked even worse. Skin was gray, his eyes hollow. He'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose, and there was something desperate in his expression that made my stomach turn. "Hello, David," I said. I couldn't bring myself to call him Dad. He flinched at the use of his first name. "Hi, kiddo. Look, You look good, successful. What do you want?" He glanced around at my porch, my small but well-maintained front yard, the new car in my driveway. "I heard you finished graduate school. That's wonderful." "I always knew you were smart." "What do you want?" I repeated. His shoulders sagged. "I need help. I need somewhere to stay, just for a little while. Just until I can get back on my feet." I stared at him. "You need help." "I know how this looks," he said quickly. "I know what you must think of me. But I didn't have anywhere else to go. You're my son. You're the only family I have left. The only family you have left." Let the words hang in the air between us. "What happened to your other family? The one you chose over us?" His face crumpled. "Patricia, she left. Took the kids and moved to Florida. She said she needed a fresh start, but really she just she took everything. The house, the savings, even the money I'd put in trust for her kids' college. She cleaned out our joint accounts and disappeared. And you want me to feel sorry for you? I want you to help me." His voice cracked. "I'm living in a motel room and I can't afford it much longer. I lost my job 6 months ago and I can't find anything else. I'm 53 years old and nobody wants to hire me. I'm desperate." I looked at this man who'd once been my father, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and told me bedtime stories. Now he was a stranger, a hollow shell of a person who'd gambled everything on the wrong family and lost. "You chose this," I said quietly. "You chose them over us. You chose to give them our house, our money, our security. You chose to leave Mom and me with nothing." "I made mistakes," he said. "I know that. But I'm trying to make things right. By showing up here with a suitcase, asking for handouts. By asking for forgiveness. By trying to rebuild our relationship." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Our relationship? We don't have a relationship. We haven't had a relationship since the night you walked out on us." "Please," he said, and I heard real desperation in his voice. "If I have nowhere else to go, if I'll do anything, I'll get a job, I'll pay rent, I'll help around the house. Just let me stay until I can figure something out." I studied his face, looking for any sign of the man I'd once admired, but all I saw was weakness, selfishness, the same entitled attitude that had made him think he could destroy our lives and face no consequences. "You know what's funny?" I said. "You want to stay here until you can get back on your feet?" It's exactly what Mom used to say when we were homeless, when we were living in her car because of what you did to us. He paled. "You were never homeless." "I left money for 3 months. 3 months, David. Do you know how long it took us to recover from what you did? Do you know what it was like watching Mom work 3 jobs just to keep us fed? Do you know what it was like? Sleeping in a car because no one would rent to us? Didn't know it was that bad? You didn't want to know. You were too busy playing house with your new family to care about what happened to your old one." He was crying now, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you and your mother. I know I was selfish, but I'm paying for it now. I've lost everything." "Good," I said. "I'm glad you've lost everything. I'm glad Patricia left you. I'm glad you're alone and scared and desperate. Because now you know exactly how we felt." He stared at me, shocked by the venom in my voice. "You're my son." "No," I said. "I'm the man you created when you abandoned your son. I'm what's left after you destroyed everything that mattered to me." "Please," he whispered. "I'm begging you. I've nowhere else to go." I looked at him for a long moment, this broken man who'd once been my hero. Part of me, a small, buried part, wanted to help him. Wanted to be the bigger person, to show mercy, to prove that I was better than he was. But a larger part of me remembered everything. The eviction notice, the nights in the car, Mom's tears. It's the years of struggle and fear and uncertainty. It's the way he'd looked at me that night on the porch, with relief in his eyes as he walked away from us. "Come in," I said finally. "But just for a minute." Funny, that's what Mom used to say, while he slept in silk sheets across town. I led him into my living room, watching as he took in the space I'd created for myself. The comfortable furniture I'd saved for and bought piece by piece. The bookshelves filled with psychology texts and novels. The diplomas on the wall high. School, bachelor's degree, master's degree. All the achievements he'd missed because he'd chosen to be somewhere else. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. He sat carefully, like he was afraid the furniture might break under him, and clutched his suitcase on his lap. "You have a nice place," he said, looking around. "I'm proud of you for—" "Don't." I cut him off. "Don't you dare tell me you're proud of me. You gave up the right to be proud of me 6 years ago." He nodded, chastened. "You're right. I wanted you to know that I never stopped thinking about you and your mother, but you stopped caring about us." "That's not true." "It is true." I walked to the desk in the corner of the room, pulled out a file folder, and set it on the coffee table between us. "I want to show you something." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. The eviction notice, the one that had arrived on that Thursday morning in May. Yellow now with age, but still perfectly legible. "Do you remember this?" I asked, sliding it across the table to him. He picked it up, and I watched his face change. As he read it, I didn't know you were evicted." "Of course you didn't. You were too busy settling into our old house with your new family." I pulled out another document. "This is the notice from the electric company. They shut off our power for 3 days because Mom couldn't pay the bill." His hands were shaking now as he looked at the paper. "Kai, left money, not enough." I pulled out another document. "This is from the bank. The foreclosure notice. They took our home, David. The home you signed over to Patricia. I thought you'd find somewhere else to live. We did." I handed him another paper. "This is the lease agreement for the motel room we lived in for 2 months. $49 a night, every night, until we ran out of money." He was crying again, but I didn't stop. I pulled out medical bills, collection notices, receipts from the food bank where Mom had swallowed her pride to feed us. Every document I'd saved, every piece of evidence of what his choices had cost us. "This is what love looks like," I said, spreading the papers out on the table. "This is what it looks like when someone loves you enough to give you everything. They have. Mom did this for me. She sacrificed everything to keep us together, to give me a chance at a future." "I wanted to help," he said weakly. "Wanted to support you both. But Patricia said, what? Her kids were more important than yours? That her family deserved security more than the family you'd already made?" I pulled out another document. "This is the emergency room bill from when Mom collapsed at work. $2,847 for stress-induced hypertension. Caused by what you did to us." He put his head in his hands. "I didn't. No, I didn't know it was so bad. You didn't want to know. You made your choice and you walked away. You didn't call. You didn't check on us. You didn't care what happened to us as long as you got what you wanted." "I was in love," he said, looking up at me with desperate eyes. "I thought I was doing the right thing. Thought Patricia and her kids needed me more. And now, do they still need you?" His face crumpled. "She said she never loved me. She said she was just using me for financial security. She said once her kids were old enough, she didn't need me anymore." I felt something, cold and hard, settle in my chest. "So you were just a meal ticket. Just like we were just obstacles to overcome." "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where normal families live normal lives. "You womp?" To know what's funny? I used to think about this moment. I used to imagine what I'd say to you if you ever came back, if you ever asked for help. And I turned back to him. I thought I'd be angrier. I thought I'd scream at you, throw you out, make you hurt the way you made us hurt. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just ... empty. Please, he said again. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking you to help me. I'm your father. No, I said quietly. You're not. A father doesn't abandon his child. Father doesn't steal his son's future to give it to someone else's kids. A father doesn't disappear for 6 years and then show up asking for favors. Walked back to the table and started gathering up the documents. You know what I learned from all this? I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about who you show up for when things get hard. And you didn't show up for us. I can show up now. He said desperately. I can be the father you needed. I can make up for lost time. It's too late for that. I don't need a father anymore. I raised myself. I became successful on my own. I built this life without you, and I'm not going to let you back in now, just because your other family threw you away. He was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. What am I supposed to do? I have nothing, nowhere to go. You'll figure it out, I said, echoing his words from that night 6 years ago. You're smart, you're resourceful, you'll find a way. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed, but it was bitter. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you left us with nothing? Was it fair when Mom had to choose between groceries and medicine? Was it fair when I had to work 3 jobs just to afford community college? He didn't answer. Just sat there on my couch, clutching his suitcase, looking like the broken man he'd become. I want you to understand something, I said, sitting back down across from him. I succeeded in spite of you, not because of you. Every good thing in my life I built from nothing. Every achievement, every moment of happiness. Every bit of security I have. Earned it all while you were playing house with someone else's family. I'm proud of you, he whispered. Your pride means nothing to me. Less than nothing. No? What would have meant something if you'd been there? If you'd helped us when we needed it? If you'd chosen your actual family over your fantasy family? I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. It's time for you to go. He didn't. Move, please. I'm begging you. I'm your father. My father died the night you walked out on us. You're just a stranger who happens to share my DNA. I gestured toward the door. Go. He stood up slowly, his legs shaking. I don't have anywhere to go. Then, I guess you'll have to find somewhere. It's the same way Mom and I had to find somewhere when you left us with nothing. He walked toward the door, then stopped. What about forgiveness? What about being the bigger person? I am being the bigger person, I said. The bigger person doesn't enable someone who destroyed their family. The bigger person doesn't reward selfishness with charity. The bigger person learns from their pain and doesn't repeat the cycle. Stood in my doorway, looking back at me with desperate eyes. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Love is a verb, not a feeling. Love is what you do, not what you say. And what you did was abandon us. Started to close the door, then stopped. You want to know what love looks like? Call Mom. Apologize to her. Try to make amends for what you put her through. Don't ask for anything. Don't expect anything. Just acknowledge the damage you caused and try to live with it. Will you tell her I asked about her? No, I won't tell her anything. She's finally happy, finally healthy, finally at peace. Not going to drag your problems back into her life. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are. But sorry doesn't pay back the money you stole. Sorry doesn't undo the trauma you caused. Sorry doesn't give us back the years we lost struggling to survive. He turned and walked down my front steps, his suitcase in his hand. I watched him walk to the street, watched him look both ways like he was trying to figure out which direction to go. He looked so small, so lost, so broken. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. This man who'd once been my hero, who'd taught me to throw a baseball and helped me with my math homework, was now a stranger begging for help from the son he'd abandoned. But then I remembered Mom crying on the couch that first night. I remembered the eviction notice, the nights in the car, the fear in her eyes when she realized we might not make it. I remembered being 17 years, old and feeling like my entire world had collapsed. I closed the door and locked it. Later that evening, I called Mom in Oregon. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" she asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm good, Mom. Really good. How's Aunt Carol?" "She's wonderful. We went hiking today. Can you believe it? Your old mother went hiking. And tomorrow we're going to visit some wineries." I smiled. After all those years of struggle, she was finally able to enjoy herself. She had a good job, a nice apartment, savings in the bank. She was healthy and happy and secure. "I'm so glad you're having fun," I said. "I am. You know, I was thinking today about how different things are now, how far we've come. Sometimes I can hardly believe we made it through those first few years. We're strong, Mom, stronger than we knew." "We are. And you know what? I don't regret it, any of it, 'cause it brought us here. It made us who we are." After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking at the papers still scattered on my coffee table. Evidence of our lowest point, proof of how far we'd fallen, but also evidence of how far we've climbed back up. I gathered up the documents and put them back in the file folder. I'd kept them for 6 years, telling myself it was just being organized. But really I'd kept them because I'd known this day would come. I'd known he'd eventually need something from us, and I'd wanted to be ready. I thought about calling him, about checking to see if he'd found somewhere to stay. But I didn't. He'd made his choices, and now he had to live with them. Just like Mom and I had lived with ours. The next morning, I got a call from my cousin Sarah. "I heard your dad came by last night," she said. "My neighbor saw him walking around the neighborhood with a suitcase, looking lost." "He wanted to stay here," I said. "I told him no. It's good for you. I know that couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. But it was necessary. Some of the family think you're being too harsh. They say family should help family." I thought about that. Family does help family, but he stopped being family the night he chose someone else's children over his own. He stopped being family when he left us to struggle alone while he lived in comfort. I agree. I just wanted you to know that not everyone will understand. I don't need everyone to understand. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror. After I hung up, I went to work. I had a good job now, one that paid well and gave me satisfaction. I was helping other people work through their trauma, helping them heal from the wounds that life had inflicted on them. It was meaningful work, work that felt like it mattered. During my lunch break, I walked to the park near my office. It was a beautiful day, sunny and warm, and I sat on a bench watching families play together. Children laughing, parents pushing swings, grandparents sharing snacks. Normal family moments that I'd once taken for granted. I thought about the man who'd raised me for the first 17 years of my life. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd come to my baseball games, who'd helped me with my homework. That man was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who'd been capable of abandoning his own child for the promise of a different life. I thought about forgiveness, about mercy, about being the bigger person. I thought about what my therapist had told me about letting go of anger, about not letting past trauma define my present choices, but I also thought about justice, about consequences, about the difference between forgiveness and enabling. I'd forgiven him years ago, not for his sake, but for mine. I'd let go of the anger, because carrying it was poisoning me. But forgiveness didn't mean I had to rescue him from the consequences of his choices. He taught me an important lesson, though he'd never meant to. He taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. Showing up when things get hard. It's putting the people you love first, even when it's difficult. It's being the person your family can count on, no matter what. That evening, I called Mom again. "Twice in 2 days," she said, laughing. I'm starting to think you miss me. I do miss you. But I also wanted to tell you something. I love you, Mom. I love you for everything you did for us, for the way you fought for our family, for the way you never gave up on me. Oh, honey, she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I love you too, more than you'll ever know. No, and I want you to know that I'm proud to be your son. I'm proud of who we became together, and I'm proud of the life we built from nothing. We did build something beautiful, didn't we? We did, and no one can take that away from us. After we hung up, I sat in my living room in the home I'd built with my own hands, surrounded by the life I'd created through my own choices. I thought about the man who'd knocked on my door the night before, broken and desperate and alone. I didn't feel guilty about turning him away. Didn't feel sorry for him. I felt ... complete, like a story that had been left unfinished for 6 years had finally found its ending. He'd come looking for the son he'd abandoned, hoping to find someone who would save him from the consequences of his choices. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who'd learned that love is earned, not inherited. That family is chosen, not imposed. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the reality they've created for themselves. I'd spent 6 years building a life without him. I'd learned to be strong, to be independent, to be the kind of person who shows up for the people who matter. I'd learned that happiness isn't something that gets handed to you. It's something you create through your own choices, your own work, your own commitment to the people you love. And I'd learned that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. Some choices can't be undone. Some damage can't be repaired. The phone rang later that evening. It was my cousin Sarah again. I thought you should know, she said. Your dad checked into the Sunset Motor Lodge tonight. The same motel where you and your mom stayed all those years ago. I felt something twist in my chest. How do you know? My friend works there. She said he looked terrible, lost, confused, like he didn't know where else to go. I closed my eyes. The same motel where Mom and I had lived for 2 months, counting every dollar, wondering if we'd ever have a real home again. It's the same place where I'd done my homework under fluorescent lights and listened to her cry quietly in the next bed. I'm sorry, Sarah said. I know this is hard. It's not hard, I said, and realized I meant it. It's exactly what should happen. He's living the life he chose, just like Mom and I lived the life he chose for us. The family's going to be upset when they find out you turned him away. Let them be upset. They didn't live through what we lived through. They didn't watch Mom work herself sick trying to keep us afloat. They didn't see what his choices really cost. I'm proud of you, Sarah said. I know that probably doesn't mean much, but I think you did the right thing. It means something, I said. It means I'm not alone in this. After we hung up, I went to my desk and pulled out the file folder again. I looked at all the documents, all the evidence of what we'd survived. Then I put them away for good. I didn't need them anymore. The case was closed. I didn't need his apology. Watching the weight of his choices finally land on his shoulders, that was apology enough.